All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going through trying to teach Java programming using an iterative set of payroll system examples, and I'm up to where I'm trying to make Java more object-oriented than it has been. So what I did in the first part of this lecture was I went through how to set everything up. I'm not going to go through that again. In the second lecture, I created three constructors. One, which is my no-arg constructor when I pass in nothing. One, which was my names-only constructor when I pass in a first name and a last name. And one that was my everything, or all values passed in constructor. All right? Now, I'm going to go in and I'm going to talk about getters and setters. And I put in here a thing from codejava.net, and I actually just Googled this. But if we look here, try to blow this up a little. All right. Oops. I want this here. Learn Java free with these video courses. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do is Jeff Scott, send it to Rankin, whatever. Send me these videos. All right. Confirm your subscription. Well, I'll do that in a minute. So, in Java, getter and setter are two conventional methods used. The getter retrieves data. A getter is also referred to as an accessor. So it's along the lines of, if I say to you, what's your name? And you say, my name is John Smith. That's a getter. I'm getting your name. If I say, what's your first name? You say John. That's a get first name. What's your last name? Smith. That's a get last name. All right. Couple things about getters. Typically, when you do a getter, you virtually always have a return type that's not void. Okay? It's typically get followed by the name of the field. And you return, again, you don't need the this, but you return something. Okay? So why am I going to the trouble of telling you that? Well, first of all, remember what I told you earlier. I said in my little abridged, we're going to use public methods to manipulate private data. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, public methods manipulating private data. So you're starting to see object-oriented programming in action. All right, so let's take a look at these. First of all, again, I'm going to add my comments. Maybe I'm being a little bit redundant here by putting in all of these comments, but better to have too many comments than not enough. All right. Now, I've told this story to my classes before, and I don't know if I've ever told it on one of these videos or not, but I'm going to right now. Years ago, I was in education for 3.5 years, and then I left and I went back into private industry for a year. Okay? While I was at this private industry, I was there for literally a week. And I went home one night and told my wife, I said, you know, I want to quit. I made a mistake. And she's like, you cannot quit. They moved us, etc. You've got to stick it out for at least a year. Well, I made it 11 months, but the point is, when I started there, the first project they asked me to work on was an order entry system. And I said, what was interesting about this was I said, well, what language do you want it written in? And I knew about 10 languages, something like that. Well, you know, what programming language? And I knew about 10 of them. So I named them all off, and they said, anyone. We actually handle all those. Oh, that was kind of a interesting thing. So I picked one and started working on it. Well, they liked what I did, so they gave me a second project. All right, the job was going a little better. I was kind of liking it. All right, there were things about the company I didn't like, but there were things about the job I did like. So I'm working on this second project, and what they had me do was the company that I was working for at the time, one of their clients was Caterpillar Tractor. And what I was supposed to do was every day they got in literally thousands of pages, all right, both hard copy and electronic copy of orders from Caterpillar Tractor. I was supposed to go and write a program that was supposed to go in and look based on certain part numbers, just pull out those orders. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. All right. What I ended up doing was, by this time, I'd already been there a few months, and I knew I wasn't probably going to be long for the place. They have changed a lot since I worked there, but at the time, it was very, for lack of better words, kind of militaristic, the way that they ran things, and I didn't like it. All right, so I want to get back on track here. What I ended up doing was I ended up writing a program that was approximately 8,000 lines long. All right, out of those 8,000 lines, believe it or not, about 50%, darn close to 4,000 of them, were comments, program comments. I put entire program runs in there so that people could figure out exactly what it was I was trying to do. All right, when I did announce that I was leaving, the person who was going to take over for me, his name's Mark, and I said, Mark, do you have any questions? And he looked through my code and he's like, how could I? You've got so many flippin' comments in here that any question I might have has already been answered. So the moral of the story is, I've never been chastised for having too many comments in a program. I have been for not having enough. So, the first name, if I make a call to get first name, it's going to return the first name. Since first name is of type string, as is last name, I have to make sure that the return type is string. So that's all it's doing. It's an accessor. All right, last name is the exact same thing, except instead of returning first name, I am returning last name. All right, then hours worked and hourly rate, you'll notice both of those are doubles. So when we have our get hours worked to return hours worked, or our get hourly rate to return hourly rate, we have to return type double. So those are our getters. That's just going to allow us to return the current first name, the current last name, the current hours worked, and the current hourly rate. All right. Now, do we have a potential problem with this? Well, we shouldn't, because if there wasn't any first name passed in or last name passed in, they'll be set to unknown. Otherwise, they are set. So we shouldn't have any kind of problem. So that should always be okay. Same thing with last name, same thing with hours worked, same thing with hourly rate. We either have a value or we have zeros, we have a value or we have a string that we put in there. So that's okay. All right. So those are our four getters. Now some programmers, and they don't like to automatically have these generated for them like I did. And the reason for that, the reason that they don't like to have them generated, is because you've got all your getters, then all your setters. And sometimes programmers like to have their get first name followed by their set first name. Then their get last name followed by their set last name. It's all a matter of personal preference. I'm going to leave it like this because we got this stuff put in for us automatically. Now, one thing about this, and again, I'm going a little nuts here, so we'll call this first name getter. Again, I'm probably now going a little too nuts with the comments, but last name getter. Hours worked getter. Hourly rate getter. All right, now I can copy all those comments because now I have my setters. This is a case, though, where it's possible that I may want to do some work in here. What do I mean? Well, if I'm setting the first name, okay, if I'm setting the first name here, I'm just assuming that there was a value passed in. But what if that value I passed in was the empty string? Right, which could happen. All right, it probably wouldn't happen, but conceivably it could happen. All right, so what I'm going to do is, instead of writing it like this, I'm going to comment out the lines that came with these routines by themselves. All right, just to show you, because that's what we got. All right, and I'm going to replace it with this. All right, I'm going to say this dot first name equals, and it gives me a chance to talk about the question mark colon operator. Okay, let me type the whole thing in, then we'll go back and look at it. Oops, did I miss one? Yes, I did. Okay. No, this is set first name. This is, oh, I am. So, let's put that here. All right. All right, so what the heck is this? What did I just do here? Well, I'm checking to see if the first name is equal to nothing. I believe I can also put the word null in here. All right, but if there's nothing in the first name, all right, in fact, I'm going to leave it at double quote, double quote. If there's nothing in there for the first name, all right, that right there says if the first name is equal to nothing. This says take the reverse of that. So this means if there is something in for the first name, take that first name that was right here and pass it in to our first name variable, which is right here. Otherwise, we're going to set that to what we set it to up here, which was UnknownFN. And I guess I did it backwards. UnknownFN. All right. Now, if you look at it, this line right here, this line, is not all that different from this line right here. So I'm going to comment this out. In fact, I'm going to comment out all 4 of these lines. All right. And I'm going to instead put in set first name. Okay, now it's not going to work because it's expecting there to be a string there. And I don't have any kind of string there. Okay? Well, it's expecting something in there. In this case, I don't have anything, so I will pass in the empty string. I can do the same thing here. So again, I'm going to comment out these 4 lines. All right. And now I'm going to say first name this is not returning anything, so set first name, and now I can pass it in. First name. All right. And I can do it again here. So again, I'm going to comment out all of these. All right. So what the heck am I doing here? Now what I'm saying is, rather than setting things myself in here, I'm going to call my setter, and in this case, I'm going to pass in the empty string, so there's nothing there. So it gets down to here, and it says, okay, set first name. If it's not the empty string, do that, otherwise do this. So take this and set it to first name. That's what I wanted. In the other 2 occasions, so when I'm doing this and when I'm doing this, I'm actually got a value for my first name. So it is indeed not equal to the empty string. So I'll take that first name and I'll set it to this dot first name. Now, I went through that quickly, but if you're still confused, watch me do the rest of them, please. All right. So this will now become set last name, and I'll again pass in the empty string. All right. This will become set last name, and I will pass in ln, and I think this one was wrong. This should be last name. And this one will be like that. All right. So now I've got a set last name, and the good news is it can look exactly like my set first name, except I have to change the first name here to last name. And make that LM. Hopefully, as you see this, it's making a little bit more sense to you. All right, let's go on. Because these next 2 are going to be different. Why? Because what's left is hours worked and hourly rate. Hours worked and hourly rate. Hours worked and hourly rate. All right. So, in this case, we're going to call this, we're going to call set hours worked, and we're going to pass in 0.0. All right, let me just copy this because it'll be a little faster that way. Here, we're going to do it, but we're going to pass in and I guess this is hours worked. Did I do hourly rate up here? Oh, hours worked, good. And here, this should be hours worked. All right. Oh, we didn't pass anything in here. This was the, so that will be 0.0. As will this one. So we've got the first one, the second one, and the third one. So let's write that routine. So right now it's not doing any validation. See that? It's not doing anything because we commented out the line. So we want to say here, this dot hours worked equal, and we can do the same kind of check. Hours worked, if it's greater than or equal to, our min hours, and the hours worked is less than or equal to our max hours. All right, so if that's the case, question mark hours worked colon 0.0. Now, again, I don't expect that to totally make a lot of sense to you. All right. First thing I'm going to do is just grab this, copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to paste it in down here, and I'm going to change all these hours worked to hourly rate. And these have to become rate as well. That'll just save me some time when I go over that in just a couple minutes. All right. So what this is saying is, if the hours worked is greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 84, it's valid. So take that hours worked and assign it here. This is one example where I don't like using the same name. So I'm going to call this HW. All right? Which means that this will be HW, which means that this will be HW, which means that this will be HW. All right? Now, if I want to be really whatever about this, now I can probably put all that on the same line because I did it that way. All right, so that's my hours worked. Here I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to call it HR for hourly rate, which will make that HR, which will make that HR, which will make that HR, which will mean that I can do this. All right. So in both these cases, I'm saying if they're within range, take that figure and assign it to our instance variable. Otherwise, assign, if it's out of range, assign 0.0, both for the hours and for the rate. Okay? All right. So let's quickly finish this one. Should be consistent here. All right, and it looks like previously I put all the new ones first and put the older ones underneath, so. Okay. So I've shown you by leaving the ones that the system provided for us, by leaving those in there, I have shown you, or showed you, what the replacement values are. Hopefully that made some sense to you. this one gets replaced with set hourly rate. Again, it's going to be 0.0 because we don't know what that is. They weren't passed in here. All right. And our third constructor, let me move these down as well. And this one will now be set hours worked, and we will pass in HR. All right. So we have now, I don't know what that's going to tell us, remove first parameter from method. No, we don't want to do that. All right. So now what I have done is I have created my getters. I have also created my setters. All right. Now, one thing to realize in here is, so far, when you look at everything that's in here, first of all, the program's already fairly big. Not a whole lot in it, but it's already fairly big. Part of that is all the comments that I put in there, and overrides and stuff that I did. But we've now accounted for getting and setting our first name, getting and setting our last name, getting and setting our hours worked, and getting and setting our hourly rate. You'll notice that gross pay is still gray because we're not using it yet. We're not doing anything with gross pay. All right? So, we're going to do that right now. Now, I could have a get gross and a set gross. But when you have values like that are going to be manipulating the other values that you have in here, you typically have a get and you don't have a set. All right, so what I'm going to do is, after all of my gets that we had in here, I'm going to add yet another get. So what do we have? First name getter, last name getter, hours work getter, hourly rate getter. This is first name setter, last name setter, hours work setter, and hourly rate setter. Okay. But before I go in here and do my first name setter, I'm going to copy all of this stuff that you see right here, and I'm going to paste it in right here. All right, now I'm going to get an error because I've got this in twice, and I'm going to call this gross pay getter. All right, this will be a public double, get gross pay. All right. I'm going to change my comments. Now, that's not going to say return hourly rate. All right. What I have to do there is I have to do my calculation to see whether or not the person has overtime coming or doesn't have overtime coming. So if you remember, if hours worked is less than or equal to max non-OT, which means worked 40 hours or less. What does that mean? No OT, straight time only. So in other words, their gross pay is going to be equal to their hours worked. In fact, we don't even do that. We want to make sure we've got the most up-to-date stuff we can. So get hours worked times get hourly rate. All right, now you are seeing object-oriented programming in action. Right there. We still won't have a return statement. All right. let's put an else in here first. And when we get all done, we also remember we want to take our total gross pay and plus equal gross pay. We want to add that to our total, then we can return gross pay. Okay? All right, so the only thing that's left in here is to do that calculation. So, worked greater than 40 hours OT coming, calculate accordingly. Not the greatest comment, but it'll work. All right, so here the gross pay is equal to the get hourly rate times max non-OT, all right, plus get hours worked minus max non-OT times get hourly rate times our OT rate. Now, earlier I did an example of how you'd use this. So I'll kind of quickly just go through it again for you. So imagine that the person, let's just look at this one first. So we've got Bob. All right, Bob worked. So hours worked is 40. Hourly rate is 25. So the gross pay will be equal to get hours worked, which is 40, times get hourly rate, which is 25, which is equal to 1,000. Exactly what we'd want. All right, so that takes care of our straight time. And notice that what we're doing in here, please notice this. What we are doing in here is we are making sure we've got the most up-to-date data by always calling our getters to get the most up-to-date value. All right, so Bob has a friend. Bob's friend is Jen. And Jen, her hours worked, she worked 50 hours, and her hourly rate is $30 an hour. So Jen's gross pay, all right, is going to be equal to this is wrong. That should be hours worked. No, that's correct. It will be equal to her hourly rate which we just said is 30 times max non-OT, which is 40. All right, so that means it's going to be equal to, what's her hourly rate? 30 times 40, which is 1,200. That is just, though, her straight time. Now we've got to add to that Jen's overtime. So plus get hours worked all right, which is 50 and we want to subtract from that max non-OT, which is 40. All right, so minus 40, which gives us 10. That's how many overtime hours she works. But then we have to multiply that by get hourly rate, which is 30 times the overtime rate, which is 1.5. In other words, 10 times 30 times 1.5. So that would be 10 times 30 would be 300 times 1.5, which is equal to 450. So if we add the 1200 and the 450 together, we get 1650, which is Jen's total pay. That's what we're doing, but we're doing it in an object-oriented manner. Now, this must all already, yeah, it's way longer than I wanted it to be. So I'm going to stop right here. And in the next part, I'm going to come in and talk about how we would write all this stuff out. All right, so I'll be right back with that.